the rest of the Old Testament. Moses begins that period of time. If you divide the Bible into three easy ways to understand, you have the patriarchs, and the patriarchs are is that system in which it was the responsibility of the father, grandfather, great-grandfather, to teach the children about God. So it would have been Adam's responsibility to teach about God, Seth's responsibility to teach about God to his family. We come down, it was Abraham's responsibility to teach, then Isaac and Jacob. So it was their responsibility. So we call it the patriarch. If you're the patriarch of the family, it's generally understood that you are the oldest male in the family. And the matriarch is the oldest female. There we go. Okay. Generally speaking. But as we come up to Exodus chapter 20, a new system is going about in which we call the law. So it's the law of Moses. So you have the patriarchs, the second system, which starts in around 1500 BC, up to, well, I won't tell you what it's up to just yet, for a moment. This is the law of Moses. It's what they talk about, the law. It was the law. And typically, the law can be thought of as either the Ten Commandments, but it's much greater than the Ten Commandments. It's not just those two tablets in which it was written on the front and back. It is the entirety of the law of which Moses gave. The Jews had a way of classifying them, and there are 613 laws. And you can go anywhere you want in the Jewish system today and ask someone who is well-versed in the Old Testament law of Moses, and you say, how many laws are there that we must obey? And they will tell you, 613. That's including the Ten Commandments that we have there. And the exact moment that the law was no longer valid was the exact moment, the crucifixion, the cross. That's why this takes you all the way from the law of Moses down to the cross. Paul says to the Galatians that it was taken away on the cross. So as we look at the Ten Commandments here, not only in Exodus chapter 20, but also in Deuteronomy chapter 5, they're exactly the same thing. But it starts out, the first four talk about the relationship to God. And some people even say that the fifth, which is honor your father and mother. We're talking a little bit about these because it's fascinating. And we have, where's Diane? We have an hour and a half? This is the one day of the month to where you are up against a hard and fast schedule because there's chicken. Okay? Enough said. But the first four, which talk about our relationship to God, and as God begins in verse 2 of Exodus chapter 20, he says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. He establishes, I am the one who brought you out of slavery. They would have understood this. You shall have, and when the Ten Commandments are given, they're only just a few months into their journey out. So all of this is fresh on the mind here. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything. And when he says anything, we talked about this last week, when he says anything, what does he mean? Anything. Anything. That is up to and including football, which I might say that the Traverse City team is playing in the championship game in Miami at 3 o'clock on YouTube, right? Okay, little commercial there for that. I almost forgetted it. And so he says, you're not going to make anything that is an image of which you were to bow down to. Now, do we have anything like that today in which people make a carved image or any kind of image and bow down to it? Yes, we have a consensus on this. Now, if you talk to someone who says, and when they go to bow down to Mary or any one of the other ones, and I have been to the Vatican in Rome, and I've seen this with my own two eyes. I had heard it, but I didn't believe it till I saw it. that people would bow down and weep and rub the foot of the statue of St. Peter. St. Peter's, his foot used to be that long. But now it's only about that long because they have, and I've seen the gradual progression of it. So, and they say, well, it's not really bowing down. Listen, it is either bowing down or it isn't bowing down. And it is. It is, you have made statues, and when he says, in fact, if you look at the Ten Commandments as it pertains to Catholicism, they don't look the same as this. Look at a Catholic Bible and judge it for yourself. One of these has been left off. He says, you shall not bow down to them or serve them, for the Lord your God, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of fathers to the children of the third and the fourth generation. We talked about this. It says, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. And that means he won't forgive you. What commandment does that sound like in the New Testament? Jesus is talking. He says, you may blaspheme the Son of Man, but anyone who blasphemes the Holy Spirit, it's pretty serious, shall not be forgiven now or in the age to come. And he says here, the same thing, you shall not take the name of your Lord God in vain. And we typically think in terms of, OMG. You've seen that on text, haven't you? You've seen it everywhere. Everywhere it says, OMG. Yes. So it's something to keep in mind whenever you pronounce. Now, the Jews were so meticulous about it that they would not even spell out. If you look at a Jewish, something that is published by the Jews, you'll see the word capital G, and then you'll see a little dash, and then you'll see a D. But they don't even spell out God. That's how particular they are. And they will, instead of spelling out Jehovah, they only use the 4 letters because they're almost pharisaical about it. But it's much deeper than just simply using, like we'd say, well, I swear to God. I swear to God. Or, God, this is a nice day out. You know, little things like that. Yes, and especially when it comes to profanity. So there's that, but it goes much deeper than that. And if you look at what the rabbinical scholars say about this, is you shall not do evil in the name of the Lord. Now think about everything that's involved in that. You shall not do evil in the name of the Lord. And we think about things that have been done in the past in the name of the Lord. We may look at, what was that campaign called that the people around England and Europe said, we're going to go back and free those people in Jerusalem. It was called the Crusades. Is they were doing this in the name of the Lord. Now, I wasn't there, so I don't know, but they, we could rally the troops together and we're going to do something in the name of the Lord. Now, I'm a strong believer that Jesus never, and I mean never, said, you are going to take people by force and make them believers. Not by the sword. They didn't have guns back then. But you're not going to do that. That's not how the gospel is going to be spread. The gospel is going to be spread by love, by this preaching of the word. That's the sword. That's our offensive weapon. Never, and I will argue to my last breath of people who say, yes, we need to use weapons. But we haven't been told to do that. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Doing things in the name of God. Doing evil in the name of God. Using the Lord's name in vain. Very interesting. We come down to verse 8, which says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Do you know that around the world, do you know how many days in the week there are for people in Japan and China and Southeast Asia and South America? You know how they reckon their calendar days? 7 days. If you ask someone in China what today is, they will tell you. Now they have their Chinese calendars, but today is Sunday. Sunday is Sunday is Sunday, all over the world. The world is run by the 7-day calendar. I wonder why. Think about it. The Olympics were run on a 7-day calendar. When they said we are going to do this event on a Monday, guess what day they do it on in China? They do it on Monday. They do it on Monday. Oh, you had me there for a moment. But the world, by and large, runs on a 7-day calendar. We think, well, that's just, and we're going to look at this, and it tells them that the law was given to who? This is very important to know. The law was given to Israel. The law was not given to us. Now, that doesn't mean that when we come down to verse 12 and it says, oh, does that mean we don't have to honor our father and mother anymore? No, it doesn't mean that. But when it... Yeah, go ahead.
All this stuff was repeated by Jesus except for the Sabbath.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
we follow Jesus.
yeah, exactly. And for us, now some people will say that the first day of the week is the Sabbath now. No. The first day of the week is not the Sabbath. The first day of the week is the day that we gather on. But when we talk strictly in terms of the Sabbath is the seventh day, which is a Saturday. And the Sabbath, yes, and for them, their calendar went just as it said in the book of Genesis chapter 1. And the evening and the morning were the first day. So their day began in the evening and continued on around to the next day. But here it's remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord. On it you shall not do any work. Now, notice what is said here. We're talking 1,500 years plus before Jesus was born. But notice what it says. And you will be amazed. You're not going to do any work. You or your son or your daughter. That's good. That's the family. Can you? If you were going into the holy days, yes. If it was one of the 3 holy days we had together, yeah. There's always somebody looking for that loophole. Now listen to what it says. Your male servant or your female servant. Why would that be significant? Why would it be significant when it says that your male servant or your female servant? Well, yeah, they'd have to do it themselves. But we're talking about slaves. And slave owners, the world over, had no regard for servants. They were, in many cases, less than human. But God says your male servant and your female servant are also having the day off, which really set them apart from the rest of the world. Because God's saying, I have regard for them. Now, he also says, or your livestock. Boy, the law of Moses is centuries ahead of the PETA movement. And the ABSCAM? What's the name of the people for the, what's the other one for protect? And I'm not saying anything against them. ASPCA, yes, for the protection of cruelty to animals. It says, your servants and your animals have the day off. There's a regard there. And when you have a regard for something, you recognize them. So yes, and it's very interesting that it says this. Or the sojourner within your gates. So it's so comprehensive, this Sabbath, that it recognizes that slaves have rights, that animals also have the day off across the board. And we talked about, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven, the earth and sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. And we understand that this was given to the Israelites. Now, how was one identified as one of God's as a male before the law of Moses? It was circumcision. That's how God recognized that people were in a covenant relationship with Him as far as the males. It was circumcision. Now it is the law. On the cross, this will be done away with as a system for righteousness for man. Then it becomes you are under Christ. And what is it that identifies us as one of Christ's disciples? Baptism. That's when we put on Christ. He preached it in the Great Commission in Matthew 28, Mark 16. Paul goes into it in Romans chapter 6. He talks about it in Colossians 3:27, that's the point at which we become in Christ. That's what identifies us. But here, it is the law that identifies them. And it would be, if you read through the Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, you will see that there are people called proselytes. When you come to Acts chapter 2, it tells us that there were proselytes from the Romans, from the Greeks. Proselytes. That means that they had converted over to that way of under the law. They were proselytes. So they would be like the sojourners in them that said, we like your God. We like your God. He said, okay, there's a ceremony you go through. Now we come down to verse 12, which it says, honor your father and your mother. And Paul would say, this is the first commandment with a promise. And when we begin to think in big terms, and this is going to hit home to us today, when it says, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Well, that's a promise for them. But Paul says that that promise is still intact for us. For what does it say about a nation, a culture, and a society that honors its father and mother? You're going to live a long time. And now, is it transversely or conversely? On the other side of that, what happens to a nation that fails to honor its mother and father? If the promise is long life, and a nation says, we're not going to honor our father and mother anymore. Well, it must be the opposite of this. Because when a nation fails to honor its parents. Now, I know that what we want to do right now is say, but, what about this parent that does that, and that? Well, in all of this, does it ever talk about loving as a commandment? It says you're going to love the sojourner, you're going to love this and that, but it doesn't talk about loving the parents. It talks about honoring them. It is showing honor to them. And there's you'll come into in the law when it says, and when someone who is older comes in, you shall rise in their presence. You see, we still have aspects of that in our world today. Japan was known as a nation that honored people, honored those who were older, respected them. It showed honor. They understood that. Our nation is not heading in that direction. In fact, we're heading in the opposite direction, to where children are looked at as having the same rights as adults. Now, we know that under the Constitution, that, we all have that life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Yes, in pursuit of happiness. But children do not have, technically speaking, under our Constitution, those, what is that first one? Is freedom of speech. They don't have freedom of speech. Do you know why? Do you know why children can't vote until they're 18? Because their thinking has not matured. We understand that. And yet there are aspects of our society that says, no, children need to have the same rights as adults. To vote, to do this, that. To be able to decide, even at a younger age, to decide on their own if they want to terminate a pregnancy. That's what our society is saying, that children have the same rights as an adult. Now, yes, and so we are seeing the great leveling of the field in the name of, well, if I could use a line from the sermon today, Satan's deep, deep teaching. Yes. Yes. Read the first 9 chapters of the book of Proverbs, and you begin to understand what the expectations are of a parent. Children don't have those rights. They are children, and they need to be treated like children. They need to understand that there is discipline, that there are consequences for this. You weren't brought into this world to be a parent, to be the friend of the child. That will come much later when they have to pick your nursing home out. But as a parent, you're not their friend. You are their parent. And as a result, you have that God-given right to discipline them and show them the consequences for doing right and wrong. But that is being taken away gradually. You're chipping away. How much of the foundation can you chip away at a building before it crumbles? Depends on the building. But it's not a good idea to chip away at the foundation. Honor your father and mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving to you. And you know where the opposite is being taught in this? Go to the higher education into college. And you will be absolutely floored at what is being taught in colleges and universities. Absolutely floored at this. You shall not murder. How many of yours say you shall not kill? Well, there is a difference. There's 2 Hebrew words, at least 2 Hebrew words, for kill and murder. The King James, which came out in 1611, said, "Thou shalt not kill." Well, in 1610 and 1611, to kill was to murder. But if it says, "Thou shalt not kill," doesn't carry with it the weight of murder. But the Hebrew word here is murder, to take premeditated, to take the life of someone away, premeditated with malice. What about war? Well, God sanctioned war in the Old Testament, but it wasn't murder. And he also sanctioned that those who committed murder were themselves to have their life taken away. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. So when people say, well, the Bible says thou shalt not kill. No, the Bible correctly says thou shalt not murder. Yes, yes, absolutely. If you go into later on into Leviticus and Numbers, it will talk about the difference. And it'll talk about that they're going to have 6 Six. 6 cities, 3 on the east of the Jordan and 3 on the west of the Jordan. They were called cities of refuge, where if someone who had accidentally, and without thinking about it beforehand, the axe head flies off the handle while they're working, and it kills the man. Okay? He didn't have that idea in his mind to do that. Or he accidentally throws a stone, it ricochets off the tree, hits a guy in the temple and kills him. Now, he has to flee to this until they can have a trial to determine, did he do it with thought in mind to kill the person? And if it was proved that he was not guilty, he had to live in that city of refuge until the high priest died. That was the law. That was the city of refuge. And can you imagine the type of this, the shadow of what this was for Christ? But it was a city of refuge. So there's a difference in killing, which was unintentional, which we call in our day and age manslaughter. We call it manslaughter. It's by accident. Okay, so those things were taken care of, and the law is very specific on this as far as that. But in the case, this talking about murder, which happens a lot. Thou shalt not murder. You shall not commit adultery. There's a story that's told, that the Jews tell the story, so because they tell it, is that Moses comes down from the mountain, he has the tablets. He says, God had put these down to 10. The good news, there's only 10. The bad news is adultery's still in it. They tell this, the Jews think this is funny. And it's a story they tell to this day. But you think of how far-reaching this is. You shall not commit adultery. Now, think in terms of these that Jesus talks about in the Sermon on the Mount when he talks about adultery. It says it goes much deeper than this. Because under this, it says, all I have to do is avoid doing the act, but I can do everything else up to that. But that's not righteousness, is it? Or to look at someone with lust in your heart, which really comes down to the last one when it talks about coveting, that wanting. But here, they looked at it as simply the act. But Jesus says, no, not so fast. I'm transliterating that. It says, anyone who looks with the intent, with the eyes, and lusts after them, has committed adultery in their heart. So he brings it home to there. You shall not steal. Pretty basic, isn't it? Of all the things that perhaps the easiest to understand is, thou shalt not steal. Now we could go into the deeper part of that aspect of stealing, but we won't. Yes. Yeah. You come down to stealing in this. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. And simply put, it means don't lie. Don't lie. And several times within the context of the law, and by the way, I have completed the first 4 books that are online that you can listen to them on YouTube. And when you look at it, it will say, you'll know exactly where you're at because there's a little banner that says Leviticus chapter 1. And when it gets to Leviticus chapter 2, guess what the banner says? Leviticus chapter 2. I thought I'd throw that. Well, it won't be on the test. But these, you can hear them being read. Paul told Timothy, and I'll close up with this as it talks about it. Paul told Timothy, he said, till I come again, give yourself to the reading of the word. Now, that's not just reading it here, but reading it out loud. And which is what in Revelation chapter 1, when it says, blessed are those who hear, who read, and who do these things. Now think of this in terms of how many people could read in the first century. Not many. Not many. So when he talked about reading, he talked about reading out loud. And I can tell you that there are people in Africa who are listening to me read these because they can't read English. And they don't own Bibles. We are so privileged in this country to be able to have that, to be able to have the ability to not only own, but to say, I can read this, I know what it says word for word. I may not know all the words because I have to look them up for definition, but I can read these things. Yes. Yes. And you shall not covet your neighbor's house. What does it mean to covet? To want. And Paul would say that covetousness is really idolatry. Idolatry. You make that your idol when you covet what someone else has. Now, I'm looking and I can look right back there and I can see Kirk. You can't hide, Kirk. Too late. And I told him earlier, and I said it to you, I admire his strong voice. But I'm not willing to strangle you for it, Kirk. Okay, that's... I admire. But what am I willing to do to get a strong voice? It takes a lot of work. You come by it naturally, I'm sure. I haven't. I really have to. When I hear Mark lead singing and I hear Tim lead singing, I think, boy, those guys have really got it. I have to struggle for everything to get it that way. But to covet means I'm willing to take it away from you. I'm so jealous of you, I'm going to take what you have because I want it. But he says, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. Anything that is your neighbor's. If I see something that someone has, and I say, I'd really like to have that. The difference is the willingness to take it from him or the willingness to work for it. Or to say, that's nice, but I can't have it. Looks like that's the way it's going to be. I'll buy one, or I'm going to come over every day to your house and use yours. I don't know, whatever that one is. But the covetousness part of it is the willingness to say, if I can't work for it and get it, then I'm happy that you have it. It's yours. I'm happy. But I'm not willing to take it from you. There's a lot of covetousness, which makes it your idol. Any questions? Self-defense. For covetousness? For self-defense. Since you asked, when we kill. And I've had this conversation I don't know how many times. And for me, if someone wants to come in and there's a difference. I've never had someone break in my house before or threaten me with life and limb. Never have. So that it's not as personal to me, but I know there are a lot of people. But I think that person comes in and, boy, there's my television. And he wants to take that television from me. And I say, no, I'm going to shoot you before you take my television. And I'm going to do it in front of my children. Have you really thought that through? Have you thought the damage you're going to do to your children? It's a television. Let them have it. You probably have insurance. And your children are going to see you kill someone over that. Think of the lesson that that's going to send to them. Now, there are other times when someone's going to threaten your children, your wife, or you. That's a different story. But I often think if it's just the property that they're going to take. That's me personally. And that's part of what Paul says in Romans chapter 14. You've got an opinion, keep it to yourself. But you asked me and I had to say it. Yes, you need my, can I help you with this? But Jesus said, if they ask you for your tunic, give it to them. If they want you to carry it a mile, you not only carry it that mile, you carry it the extra mile. But he never told us to take someone else's life. And I know that there are going to be times, and especially because we live in the United States and we have the Second Amendment, and I have nothing against that. I love guns. I just don't own one. I grew up shooting guns. I grew up hunting. I love hunting. I love shooting guns. But I don't want to ever come into that position of killing someone. I really don't. And I pray that it never happens to me. I really do. But I know that it doesn't always happen that way. Debbie, you had your hand up, and then we'll end it. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. All right. And again, that is just my opinion. It's one that I live by. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. And I'm okay if people feel different about it. I really am.